Before I start, let me say this. I'm not the kind of person who scares easily. I've spent most of my life rationalizing the unexplainable, brushing off strange events as coincidences. But what happened to me 3 years ago, what I'm about to share with you, shattered that sense of safety forever. It still haunts me, and no matter how much I try, I can't shake the feeling that it's not over, that it's waiting. My name is Evan, and this is my story. It started innocently enough. I was moving back to my hometown after nearly a decade away. My job had transferred me to a remote office, and I figured it was as good a time as any to reconnect with my roots. I'd rented a modest little house on the edge of town, just a few miles from where I grew up. It wasn't much, a single-story bungalow surrounded by dense woods, but it felt quiet, peaceful. The first few days were uneventful. I unpacked, settled in, and got to know my neighbors. They were friendly, if a bit reserved, but there was one thing they all seemed to agree on. Don't wander too deep into the woods, they'd warn, their faces turning serious. Strange things happen out there. I brushed it off as small-town superstition. Every place has its legends, right? I didn't think much of it, not until that night. It was a Friday, and I decided to spend the evening unwinding with a movie and a beer. Around 11 p.m. I heard it, a faint tapping at the back door. It wasn't aggressive, just a soft, rhythmic knock. At first, I thought it might be a tree branch swaying in the wind, but when I opened the door, no one was there. I stepped outside, peering into the darkness. The forest loomed just beyond my backyard, a wall of black that seemed to swallow the light from my porch. "Hello?" I called out, but the only response was the chirping of crickets. I shrugged it off and went back inside, locking the door behind me. But as I turned to head to the living room, I noticed something strange. Muddy footprints leading from the door to the middle of my kitchen floor. My heart dropped. Someone had been inside. That night, I barely slept. I'd triple-checked all the locks, but every creak of the house made my skin crawl. Around 3 a.m., just as I was starting to drift off, I heard it. A whisper. It was so faint I almost thought I'd imagined it, but it was there, coming from the direction of my closet. Evan. My blood turned to ice. I sat up, straining to hear more, but the whisper had stopped. Gathering every ounce of courage I had, I got up and opened the closet door. Nothing, just clothes and an old suitcase. But as I turned to go back to bed, I saw something written on the fogged-up mirror across the room. "You shouldn't have come back." The next day, I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things. Stress, exhaustion, an overactive imagination. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. And when I found more muddy footprints leading from my backyard to the edge of the forest, I decided to confront whatever it was head-on. Armed with a flashlight and a baseball bat, I ventured into the woods. The air was heavy, the kind of oppressive silence that makes your ears ring. I followed the trail for what felt like hours, the flashlight casting long, eerie shadows among the trees. Eventually, I came to a clearing. In the center was an old, decrepit cabin, its windows shattered and its roof sagging. Against my better judgment, I approached. The door creaked open at the slightest touch, revealing a room filled with old, rotting furniture and the unmistakable stench of decay. That's when I saw it, a figure standing in the corner, its back to me. It was tall and gaunt, its skin pale and stretched tight over its bones. Before I could react, it turned to face me, and I can't describe what I saw. Its face was wrong, a grotesque mask of features that seemed to shift and blur the longer I looked. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back in my house, locking every door and window. My heart was pounding, my mind racing, but one thought kept repeating: it knows where I live. Over the next few days, the activity escalated. Doors slammed on their own, objects moved, and at night, I'd hear that same whispering voice, growing louder and more insistent. "Evan, come back." One night, I woke up to find my bedroom, window wide open. Sitting on the windowsill was an old rusted key. I don't know why, but I knew it belonged to the cabin. Against every shred of logic, I felt compelled to return. When I arrived at the clearing, the cabin looked different. The windows were no longer broken, and light spilled from inside. The door opened before I could touch it, and the voice beckoned me in. I don't remember much of what happened next, just fragments. The feeling of hands gripping my arms, the sound of laughter that wasn't my own, and the overwhelming sense of being watched by something ancient and malevolent. When I woke up, I was lying in my backyard, clutching that same rusted key. I moved out the next day, leaving everything behind. I don't know what it wanted or why it chose me, but I do know this. It's still out there. And every now and then, I'll find muddy footprints outside my apartment or hear a faint tapping at my window late at night. If you ever find yourself near the woods by my old town, do yourself a favor. Stay away. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed.